Welcome back. And we are live. Okay, fantastic. Welcome back to another episode of the Mind Meld PR vlog. And today I have a special guest, Melissa Breker, who is the head of Breker Group. We're going to learn more about Melissa in a moment. Today we're going to be talking about changing how companies communicate. Changing how companies communicate. So this is something that Melissa knows all about, and I know a little bit about. So let's put two heads together and have a fun conversation. Before we get started too far along, Melissa, maybe you can give your origin story. What makes you the best person to be talking about changing how companies communicate?
Well, I started way back in the beginning in marketing. And really what I started to notice was so many companies were really struggling with actually thinking strategically around content. So from there, through the process of learning more about content strategy and the requirements, what I really uncovered was that changing how people think around how we communicate and how we connect with people was actually one of the biggest obstacles. So really from my perspective, what I've spent my work doing is really helping prepare people to really connect around a common vision. So they're better able to really not only understand who they're connecting with, but actually get the results that they want. Because let's face it, we've all been in the situation where, we think people understand what we're saying, but in reality, it's just, it doesn't land. So my whole thing is consulting and communicating and really coaching people through what are the better ways for us to work together, and how can communication really help us do that?
Well, you are the expert, so we're about to learn a lot. So I'm very much looking forward to chatting with you about this. I've known you for a number of years, actually, although we've never worked closely together, but we sort of keep very similar circles in the Vancouver marketing and communications sector. So I'm really looking forward to this. This is the first time maybe in a long while we've had a chance to really dig deep into something. So without further ado, let's kick off with my first question. Let's get specific. What are some common problems with how companies communicate externally with their customers?
When it comes to connecting with outside users, often when we're creating content or any kind of communication, what's happening is we're taking our own perspective. So that means if you were to, I guess my challenge would be for you to have a look at your website and circle every time you see we, us, and our. So the real problem is that we're not communicating and the user focus is off. We're thinking too much about ourselves versus what people really want, which is they want to get in, they want to get and have a great digital experience, and they want to leave. I hate to say this, but they don't actually necessarily care about you in that way. They have a task to complete. So I think one of the biggest problems that we see in terms of how we're communicating is it's all about us. It's me, versus thinking about who you're actually connecting with, what they care about, and what problem do you actually solve. That's one of the biggest problems.
So I think a really good example of this, or you can tell me if it is a good example. We all saw a flurry of corporate newsletters and updates and emails in the wake of COVID. And one of the funniest tweets I saw was, I think it was from a marketer saying, I just didn't know. how much all these companies cared about me. Um, but they really do. And well, and he was being facetious in that, you were just talking about, whether or not, or how much these customers actually care about what you're offering on your website or in your communications. Um, to me, they don't want to hear necessarily messages of sympathy and understanding, or they don't want to hear it 100 times from 100 different companies in a week. They want to know how you're going to solve their problem fast, cost effectively, and take out cost and just say effectively.
Exactly, or productively. I think the other thing is there's not only a lack of user focus, but I think often we use, especially when it comes to social, we use channels for the wrong things. So with social media, as you know, each channel attracts a certain kind of audience, and you've seen the memes like Instagram is, the lifestyle you wish you had, and Facebook is for the oldies, and all of these kind of things. But somehow in trying to distill a message out, people use the wrong channels. So they don't necessarily, they're not strategic in how they are sharing the information. So it's a match and expected.
I think this actually has to do with the nature of the tools we're using for social media. So, Hootsuite, for example, and I don't want to pick on them because they have a great product and it works exactly as it's supposed to, in that you can syndicate messages across different platforms, and you could adjust them and schedule them separately for different platforms. But in my experience, when companies do sign up for these platforms and, with the intent, we're going to save all this time, what they wind up doing is creating one message for all channels. And it's usually the sort of lowest common denominator, maybe the message that they would put out on Facebook. And then just splash it out on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and all the rest. And there's nothing. It's just the same message for every platform.
Yeah, it's vanilla marketing. It's the one size fits all. And the tricky thing about that, especially with the companies I work with, when you do that, when you're not strategic in how you're communicating, what it comes across is like, oh, that's noise. I have to turn that down.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, it's easy. It's very easy to share the same message across different channels, for sure. Very easy. But again, you've got to think about the outcomes you're trying to achieve.
Sure. So, you might think of, say, a high effort, high reward kind of strategy for some kinds of businesses, say on LinkedIn. I know for my own business, doing personalized outreach through in-mails and personalized messages to certain CEOs and CTOs and other people on my radar, people I have a genuine connection with, and I think they could really use what I'm providing in the near term. That's it takes effort to target, to find the right people, and oftentimes adjust your message completely for each individual.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. You've hit it on the head. If you have a generic message that says, dear name, and we've had those emails come out, right? Where the fields didn't match properly. And then suddenly it's like, dear name, we appreciate your business. And you think about it from a customer experience perspective. How does that make you feel? It's kind of like, I'm so sorry. No, that is not what we want. And I think, to your point, being able to understand channel requirements and being able to be thoughtful in why you would want to reach out to someone on LinkedIn. The generic message like, I want to connect with you on LinkedIn. Take the time How long does it take to figure out why you would want to connect with someone? Because you're reaching out with them for a purpose anyway, right? So you want to connect. Why don't you explain why you want to connect? Like, what are the relationships that you see would make sense? Like, oh, we have over 50 connections in common. It's funny that we haven't met yet. I'd love to connect with you here and learn more about you and what you're up to. Something as simple as that. You give context as to why you think it might be a reason for, for us to connect. It really doesn't take that much time. It's like, be strategic. And if there's not a match, don't reach out. It's a waste of their time. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of their time. Just invest in the things that are going to work.
Yeah. Well, we've come a long way since, people were building outreach lists with the phone book and the yellow pages. Sure. we can be more targeted than this.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, all right. So let's say, I think we've done a pretty good job of listing out some specific problems that can come up, either wrong message for the wrong platform, or just, not understanding what it is that the customer wants, or not speaking to the, not using more, you and your versus I and us kind of language. So these are some common problems, but all right. So let's say, a company has taken an in-depth look into their soul and found themselves wanting. So, they're taking a legit effort to grow and change up how they communicate. And I'm not sure if this is a separate question, but how does this let's keep this specific. So what are some of the first things that they need to do, regardless of the size of the company, if they want to change?
You always start at the beginning. So if I'm not sure what the soul searching involved, but typically actually doing some, and regardless if you're a product or a service, it doesn't actually matter. Actually taking the time to understand what the client, not only why they come to you in the first place, and what problems you're actually trying to solve with your service, is a really great place to start. So if you come from a user perspective at the very beginning, then you can quite easily determine how your communication either is meeting their needs or if there's a gap. So often when we think about how we're connecting with people, we can look at different frameworks like a content journey perspective. So if you think about it, when we're buying something, we all go through specific stages. So we typically go, you identify a need, there's some research, there's the decision, there's like a post, like, how is this working for me? And hopefully we get to a place called advocacy, where they become a brand advocate for you. Now, it's not a linear process. It's not like I'm in research right now. But even if you're looking for something like a lawnmower, like, you still go through these phases, and you go through different channels. So you might ask your neighbor, like, what lawnmower do you have? And the broad questions start to get quite narrow as they go through the experience. So instead of like, I want a lawnmower, it's now, I want an electric lawnmower that has a battery power of 8 hours that can be plugged in and my neighbors can use. So as we're going through these, the experience from a specific audience perspective, we can then use the result of that journey to actually say, okay, so what questions do people have? What kind of topics are they expecting to see that address their questions? And then how can we help them? How can we offer the right information so people are like, oh, this is a fit for me. This is so great. This is the lawnmower that I'm looking for with these features. And here's how I buy. And it's very simple. So it's a very generalized approach, but
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well, I think, that's a great way to look at it in sort of an abstract way, and then in a maybe more tactical way. You see companies that still are putting out lots of blog posts and top. They'll have a series on our top 5 tips about how to use XYZ, which is
mm-hmm,
part of their product line. And so they'll put a lot of time and effort into education.
mm-hmm,
And I know one of my SaaS clients has had a lot of success with that, where they sort of provide so much information that even if they know that some of the information won't be digested by actual customers, it doesn't matter because some of it will be.
mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a lot of companies are still doing this, and I think it's the right thing. I don't know why every year there's someone makes a bold statement, the blog is dead, and it's like,
Mm.
nope, it's
It,
still a
it
tool.
survives. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the real question is, what questions do your audience have?
Mm,
Like, what are they curious about? What, like, as they're exploring their options, what do they need to know?
mm,
And then how does the topics that you're sharing, whether it's through your product pages or whether it's through blog articles, how do those things actually match?
mm,
Because really what we want to do is we want to be that trusted source. We want to be able to help them understand things that they don't quite understand yet,
mm,
right?
mm,
And more importantly, how we can help them get to where they want to go.
mm. How do you maybe let's take a little step back.
Mhm.
How can you identify when there is a problem that you can be relatively certain you're not answering the customer's question?
I think it shows up in multiple ways.
Mm,
The first thing is have a look at your web traffic. Have a look at where people are staying on your website, right? So you've got some analytics in place. So analytics can be a really great place to understand which topics are really working and which topics may not be a fit.
mm,
And it's not to say that the topic isn't important if you're not getting traffic there, but maybe it's not optimized in a way for people to actually find it in the first place. The second thing to look at is, what calls are you getting from people? What questions are actually people calling in about? Because those questions are undefined topics. So if you're able to provide content on your website and it's like, I don't understand which screw I need for this thing. Okay, that right there is a topic to share with people. Especially, you'll see the themes in the calls that you're getting.
mm. So
So
that's
that's just a missed opportunity to provide content that's relevant, targeted, and specific to where they are through this buying journey or through the customer journey.
right. So, communication isn't just about speaking and broadcasting, it's about listening and so you have to
Thank you.
understand.
This is 100%. If we actually took the time to listen and ask
Mm,
better questions, whew, all of that content that isn't working would never be created in the first place. So
mm,
it's actually, I often recommend to stop what you're doing. Don't keep churning if it's not creating the results, because
mm,
it's wasting your time and you're not getting the results. So it's kind of like, let's take a step back.
mm.
What is working? And how
To-
can we do more of that?
Totally, totally. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit because
Sure.
we've been talking a little bit. Well, we've been focusing on external communications
Mm-hmm.
essentially to customers.
Right.
But another interesting thing that you're involved with is helping companies to implement employee engagement approaches, and so communicating internally, and especially now that we're all remote. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, take it away.
How much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding. The biggest challenge many of us are facing right now is this, it was business as usual and now it is not business as usual. And now I have to have conversations with people in different ways, different, like remotely, like this all the time. And so there's a big opportunity here, actually. I mean, it's disruptive, and there's still lots of uncertainty. We really don't know. I can't say, well, on this date it will all be solved. No, we're all in the same boat together. But it's kind of an opportunity simply because, just as I said, we should stop from our external communication perspective. I'm saying this is the perfect break for us to have a look and see what we're actually doing with folks, because there's a much higher likelihood that people, because of this uncertainty, are becoming disengaged. And I'm sure lots of you may be doing things like, oh, we've got the social cocktail hour happening, so we're connecting. Yes, and I would say yes. There's lots of opportunities to do it differently. So that's one option. But actually having real person-to-person conversations like we're having right now, they don't have to happen by accident. Like, we can actually think about the relationships we have with people at work and actually work to make them stronger and better. And a great place to start actually is there's something called a stakeholder analysis framework. So it's basically, and you can Google this, but it's a way for you to map out the relationship of everyone on your team in terms of influence and power. So it's like people can be very much engaged on a project, or they have a big impact or influence on it, but they also have influence, right? So interest and influence are the two. Anyway, Google it, you'll see. And really what we want to do is we want to identify the people we should really invest in to help us share our messages in a strategic way. So right now you might be saying you have the same thing, vanilla messaging. It's like same thing for everyone. But what if we took a step back and we took a different perspective? What if we identified 3 people within your group that are the big influencers? And we could start to share kind of different messages with them about what you're doing and the work that you're doing, so they share it with other people in a storytelling capacity, right? So we don't think about our relationships because it's like, oh, oh, we're friends, we're good, oh, we do this. But actually, excuse me for my noisy coworker. Really what we can do is we can challenge our thinking around our relationships at work as well, because we have this natural disruption, right? So that's the opportunity that we have, is to actually reset and maybe think strategically about some of our relationships as well.
Can you give me a specific example about how that approach might have worked, either with a personal client? You don't have to name names,
yeah,
or just so I can sort of make this
understand what that looks like. Okay, yeah. So I'll give you a scenario, and then so there's on a project I was recently working on, there was 15 people within the group that was part of the key group. 2 of the people had very low interest. Like they were like, they also had low influence. So those people I really wouldn't invest in, right? But then there are people that have higher influence and low interest. So I would keep those people informed. I would let them know, but I wouldn't spend too much time. Then there are people that have lots of interest, but have low influence. So again, we would be sharing, even though it may not be impactful for right now, further down the track, they may be able to support messaging in a very specific way. Like they may, because they're very interested in, like, they're like, tell me more about what's happening with your project. Right? But the people in the top right quadrant, they're the people that have interest and influence. So they're the people that spread the seeds of your story and spread the seeds of the messaging that you have about the project, the impact it's creating, and why it's important to change. So that's where you focus all of your attention. Does that help?
Yeah, that's clear. I think I'm cognizant right now that you've been very generous with your time, but I wanted to ask you one final question, and it's around resistance to
Mm-hmm.
change.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things we've been talking about are ways to implement positive change or effective change in communication, both internally and externally.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not always a straightforward or easy journey, because you can get hurdles that are deliberately placed in your way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can be specific about some of the kind of resistance to change that you've seen and how to overcome it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting when it comes to resistance, and resistance to change is one of those things that's like it's kind of done this is a big topic, and people, there's quotes like, people don't resist change, they resist being changed. So when it comes to change too, there's different factors at play. So often there's the top-down approach. So it's like, you must change. But also we can apply a different lever in terms of a bottom-up. So it's kind of like we're having two different perspectives working together, right? So if we think about people that are in projects like these high interest, high influence folks, they can actually be champions for the change. And really, resistance for change relates to a lack of readiness for change. Not that often it's because people don't really understand the impact for them. So they're like, I'm not, you're going to have to convince me, I'm not doing that, forget it.
Yeah.
Right?
So would an example of that be, for instance, we had on a very simple level, there was a company I worked with. We were putting out messaging that some messages on LinkedIn, and we wanted to make use of other employees outside of the marketing department who, let's say, had LinkedIn accounts. And it's like, all you have to do is like or share. And certain departments just like would not get on board, even if they would say yes. And of course, I get that it takes 10 seconds, and I'm on LinkedIn right now, there's a tab open. It just would not happen. It's, I mean, part of it was I totally understood it wasn't their job, and they didn't see it as, well, it wasn't part of their job description.
Yeah.
If they looked at it larger as this isn't just a job, this is, I'm part of an organization and part of something bigger, and I want it to succeed. And maybe they could look at it that way, but there was for this tiny thing, and it could have potentially improved the reach of some of our messaging at a fairly critical time. Could have improved reach by double, triple, because it's a fairly big company, and just couldn't get it to happen. So I don't know, is that a good example of resistance to change, and how would you get past that?
So that really points to readiness for change. Because when you ask them, how involved were they before you asked them?
Well, not at all.
So it's kind of like me saying, so Jonathan, could you use your personal professional network to share out a message about this workshop I've got coming out? After we haven't, you don't understand, what's the purpose of the workshop? Who are we targeting? What does it mean for me? What's my knowledge around, like, what's the bigger organizational goal? What's my goal if I share it? Right? And then how will you offer me support? Like, after it happens, have you clarified what happens if someone comes back to me? Are you providing me other messaging? How are we going to reinforce that behavior? Like, all of these things, you just came out of the blue and said, it's kind of like bumping into someone on the street saying, will you marry me? Well, first of all, who are you? What are you doing? Why would I marry you? What's expected of me? What will happen if we do get married? Right? You don't do that.
Well, I know. No, actually, I don't know anyone who would do that.
No, exactly. I don't know. Your friends may be different from my friends. Clearly, that's a funny analogy.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if you had, let's do a reverse-o-matic. Let's talk about a different scenario. So you've identified there's an opportunity for them to share. One of the first things you could do is say, we're going to be having a lunch and learn around what we're doing with this particular campaign, and share some of the successes that we've had so far. Or if it's a new campaign, maybe it's like, we're really promoting these products in this way coming up. What we're hoping for is we'd love to get your insights in terms of what would work for promotion. Maybe you have some ideas you can share. Right? We have some ideas, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Bring them in, have a conversation. Hi, here's what we're doing for this project. We're really excited about it for these reasons. Here's the business outcomes we're hoping to achieve. Before we tell you about what we're doing, we'd love to get your thoughts about how you could get involved and what that would look like.
Right. So, yeah, be reasonable, I guess, is the...
It might be like a 30-minute conversation, but they know about the project, why it's important, what kind of outcomes you're expecting, how they can participate, and maybe they have a better idea. Or maybe they're building on your idea. Oh, fantastic. We're collaborating.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the resistance to, doing something like that, in whether it was my team or other teams that are facing a similar scenario, and I'm not talking about the resistance from the people who wouldn't share the LinkedIn messages. I'm talking about the resistance of someone to do that lunch and learn or do the prep work is where we project our attitudes and our knowledge on others. So we assume people know things that they don't know. And so, for someone in the company to make a suggestion, just, do this. It's going to take you 10 seconds. This is great. You're assuming maybe, I don't know, hours worth of knowledge and wisdom and experience in that person that they have no idea what you're talking about.
No, and not only that, it's their personal professional network. So they have ex-bosses on there. They have like people they've met at conferences on there. And so you also have this perception around how will I be perceived if I share this message, right? What's my personal brand and what's the impact to that? So the approach, that top-down approach, can certainly, I think it's important from a business perspective, but I'm also saying, how can we kind of turn things on the side and actually identify the champions within the group and use the top-down to actually, so we kind of work together. Not only that, why don't we ask different kinds of questions? Instead of telling, why don't we ask? Like, what other things can we explore? Because they will tell you what their comfort level is, and they will own that decision, versus you saying, could you do this? It will take you 10 seconds. So even the fact that you've indicated that it's just a quick thing means that maybe you haven't thought about the long-term impact for me, because it's my personal professional network. So it's engaging them in a different way and asking some questions up front, and then, they can opt in or opt out. But the people that opt in, they're like, yes, this is fantastic.
Yeah. So it's taking advantage of, or not even taking advantage, but, I'll say using human psychology in a straightforward way. People want to know what's in it for them. Tell them what's in it for them, and good things will happen.
Ask the question, what's in it for you? What do you think this could mean for you? What questions do you have? Where do you think it might be, where do you think there might be obstacles or roadblocks for you to do this?
Okay. Well, this has been a wide-ranging and educational conversation. I've really enjoyed actually delving into this. So, however, we could go on for hours. So let's make sure that we do talk in future. We'll have you on the show again.
For sure.
In the meantime, if people wanted to find you online, learn more about Breker Group, how would they do so?
You can find me on LinkedIn as Melissa Breker, or you can find me at brekergroup.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you've been listening to the Mind Meld PR vlog. I am your host, Jonathon Narvey. I've been speaking with Melissa Breker, and I look forward to having you once again on the Mind Meld PR vlog. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.